Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Velvet Lounge Life. This is Poldark, episode 6, season 5, which is the final season. They packed a lot into this episode, as they will over the next several episodes. There's only 3 left, which includes this one. So do me a favor, please give us a thumbs up. And also, please subscribe to our channel, The Velvet Lounge Life, super easy. Just go below, give us a thumbs up or give us a thumbs down. Either or, we appreciate it. It'll let us know if we should continue doing things like this or not. So I am going to get right into this. If I run out of time, I will put part 2 in another video. Hopefully I don't run out. So there was enough money raised from Demelza and her brother's efforts to build the school, which is really cool. It'll be the first school in Truro. So there's lots of celebration around that, while Ross is in the house addressing them on behalf of Ned. I would say 95 to 98% of the house agrees with everything that he's saying. However, they don't know that, there are some crooks in the background that are, paying people off and doing all sorts of maneuvering to ensure that Ned and they're hoping that Ross end up at the end of a noose. Ross gets chastised by Mr. Mercer because, and I'm going to call him Mr. Mercer, because he, is defending Ned. He's basically telling him, you need to stop protecting him or you will basically end up in the same place where he is. And of course, Ross does not like that. He doesn't like being told what to do, especially when he's always about doing right. So George and his uncle decide to take a stroll in the park. Probably wasn't their best decision because, as they're strolling, they're talking about, the events that are occurring. They're talking about the fact that George, doesn't 100% agree with how some things are going, but he's just going along with it because it will benefit him and, of course, him and his uncle and their business. Because of his talk about slavery, he knows that he has a double digit. That's not a good thing. From the people, they just don't want anything to do with him, is one. And number 2, they are shunning him. When he walks by, they look down at the ground. He gives them salutations and they give him nothing in return. Cecily addresses her father. She tells him that she did not ask Jeffrey Charles to come over, ask for her hand in marriage. She apologizes that it happened that way. And she's really trying to soften him up and tells him what a great guy he is. Her father is like, wait a minute, you know that he's a scoundrel. He got caught doing some stuff. And she then comes back and is like, no, he didn't get caught doing some stuff. You know he didn't do anything wrong. And you know that you tried to set him up, and, they basically get into it, and she's told that he will never marry her. Like, he'll never allow that to happen. And for her to prepare for George. And he even gave her the old talk to the hand, like literally the talk to the hand. So it's beautiful in Truro. Demelza is actually preparing the kids to go to their first official day of school. Of course, they've been to school with Moena, but now they're actually sort of calling it that. And the teacher might be late for class. Why? Because she gave up that. Yes, she and her husband had a night of love and passion. And they basically did it all night long. And she's now ready for breakfast, if you know what I mean. And he is more than willing to oblige. It's really nice to see them bring their marriage full circle, and it's now consummated. So Demelza receives news from her manager at the mine that someone has been stealing ore, and they've been stealing a lot of it, and they've been stealing it for approximately 2 weeks. And so they tried to devise a plan of what to do. Demelza's brother Sam teaches Rosina how to read, and these two are actually getting kind of close, which is actually really nice. And she basically says something to the effect, and I am paraphrasing, that you're alone, I'm alone, maybe we both don't need to be alone. We're, you know, and he looks incredibly handsome in this shot, very shy. I like that about her brothers. They're not around the way kind of guys. They're just really good, wholesome men. And Kitty and Ross tried to keep up a good face as they visit Ned in prison. There's some reflection that does take place because, I think they all know what's going to probably happen. Or at least they suspect they know what's going to happen. And Ned is like, I wish that I had kept my mouth closed, this and that. So he's having some regrets here because he realizes that his friends are involved, his wife is involved. Crap hit the fan, and it's incredibly serious right now. Like, we might not get out of this one. And there are many tender moments between Ned and his beautiful wife, Kitty, tear-jerking moments at that. And it's awesome the way they did this shot. The picture probably isn't doing it justice because, hey, copyright situations. And so the sun is basically beaming through on Ned as he reflects and, has tender words with Ross. So, unfortunately, once again, and of course, George is always up to his shenanigans. And so his plan now is to basically poison the jury pool by bribing everyone, paying them off, doing the same with the judge and anyone else he can get his hands on so that Ned is found guilty of these fake charges. Jeffrey, Charles, and Cecily meet in secret, and unfortunately with them meeting in secret, it's not really secret because her father has spies following her everywhere. She kind of suspects it, but she's trying to be under the radar, but it's just not working. And the two of them decide that they need to, finalize their plans for elopement. Of course, the spy doesn't know what they're talking about, but he does see them. Dr. Ennis and Caroline talk about Ned's situation. And in the meantime, Ross and Kitty return from the prison, and they're now letting their emotions show that, my God, what are we going to do? We're at the 11th hour. Like, is there anything that we can do to save Ned? And the evil Mr. Mercer, he is, unfortunately, Ross has no idea that this guy is a piece of garbage. He has no idea whatsoever. So he's still consulting with him, trying to find a way to save Ned. But as he's doing this, of course, and Ned did the same. Ned also, Ned and Ross confided in this fellow without knowing that he was no good. And, he's basically telling Ross, no, don't talk to anyone else. Don't go, to a higher level to try to save Ned. He'll supposedly supersede for them, which of course he never really does. Demelza has a moment of reflection and happiness as she thinks about and looks at her brothers who are both in love with their pretty little ladies. And you have, of course, Drake and Moena, who are now outwardly affectionate, even in public. And, of course, you have Sam and Rosina building a relationship, and Demelza approves of both. But you still have the evil Tess, who's jealous of everyone versus doing her own work and making her own way. And she's trying to devise a plan that we'll talk about. We're talking about it now. Her plan is to get her hands on Sam. He's not married. It might actually work. So she decides to ask him about forgiveness for all of her sins, if that's even possible. And, they have a conversation about that. George and Ralph, now are talking about just forget about all these other fancy wedding plans. Let's do it tomorrow. Let's just get this done, get it over with. And Ned is preparing for his trial. And of course, the trial takes place. And everyone is incredibly worried. The air is thick with, no one is like really 100% sure of what's going to happen. But, a lot of false witnesses have come forth, so who knows? But Jeffrey Charles receives a letter from Cecily. And the letter is, basically saying, if we don't do this now, we're not going to be able to do it. We have to elope now. And Demelza has a conversation with her brother about the thefts that are taking place at the mine. She decides to follow one of Tess's cronies, who happens to be Rosina's dad, believe it or not. That was shocking. And Ned is, the court case is not going well. He's basically like, are you kidding? I can't believe that all of these, I don't even know these people that are testifying against me and bearing false witness. Like, what can we do? That's what he's basically saying with his face. He didn't say any words. And Demelza finds the crooks, and she can see who some of them are, and she can see them, running their crooked operation of theft. And they're loading the boats with bags of iron ore. Ross defends Ned in the court and talks about his amazing war record, his work ethic, how he risked his life numerous times for the crown. And he brought a melting pot of people together without, having to have slavery, and without, having to demean women. Like, he's for the men, he's for the women, he's for people of every socioeconomic background as well as color. And this is what we should all strive for, is basically what he's saying. Of course, he added a few extra words, which, kind of put a frown on folks' face, and they're really super worried at this point. So Demelza talks to her manager and tells him, I basically think I know who the thieves are. He says, I know Tess is involved. And she's like, yeah, probably, but I don't have proof yet. And so they are looking back at Tess in this picture, and they're like basically saying, we need to keep an eye on her because, that will probably lead us to everything we need to break down this operation and squash it. It got to a point of desperation, to the point where Dr. Ennis had to be called to the stand, because they kind of know that, like, there's not a lot that they could do for Ned. But Dr. Ennis tries to use an insanity plea, stating that, basically Ned was probably delusional in his defense, and he basically thinks that if he pleads for mercy, that even though Ned might end up in prison, at least he won't die. So at this point, they're trying to simply save his life. Cecily's chaperone and maid, and I don't know what else she does. She does pretty much everything. She brings a note to her from Jeffrey Charles. She's been their go-between, which is super sweet. And the note basically says, he agrees that we need to do this and we need to meet here. So Cecily, as well as her chaperone, are really happy. Unfortunately, guess who George drags to the court case? Oh my God, little wee Valentine. You just have to wonder what the after effects are going to be on this child and when he grows up. But he asked Valentine, basically, I think just seeing, like, are my evil lessons working? He asked him, what do you think should happen to Ross's friend? And Valentine says, Uncle Ross's friend should be free. Like, basically, he should be let go. He should be free. And of course, because he said that, he's sort of, verbally chastised, because he's told that Ross is of no relation to him, which is not true. It's his son, but neither George or his son know that. And also, of course, he wants Ned to be murdered. So, they come back into the courtroom, and the verdict is red. And I think you could tell by the look on everyone's face what the verdict was. It was horrible. And so the punishment is red, and the punishment is basically that Ned is to be hung, but not, he's to be hung within an inch of death. Then he's to be taken and gutted, so he's supposed to have his guts, like, you know, spilled. And then they would take his body, chop his head off, then quarter his body, and I think burn it. So, of course, upon hearing all of this, Kitty faints because, my God, talk about brutalization and overkill. No wonder the world is what it is today. I mean, it's been going on for decades. And so these folks get together and they really try to put the final plans on the prison break. Dr. Ennis is like, you guys are crazy. This will never work. Look at this whole situation. It's a madhouse. And Caroline basically tells him, guess what? You are going to get involved, you know, whether it works or not. Your life was saved by a risky venture, and, you know, Ned definitely deserves the same type of treatment. This picture is rather dark, but it's of Dr. Ennis, and Ross is in disguise as they attempt to make entry into the prison, which they do successfully. And they actually get into the cell with Ned, and the guard agrees to leave the door open. So a plan is in place, and they're going to use a map that Kitty drew of the prison for this prison break. So Dr. Ennis bids adieu to Ned and good luck, because if the plan works, then Kitty and Ned should end up in Jamaica. So we have Jeffrey, Charles, and Cecily making their run for the border. They are, of course, you know, on their way to elope, but their plan is foiled when the carriage is stopped by whomever, I'm assuming some of her father's spies, and they're actually brought back to Truro. You'll see what happens. So Ned and Ross are on their way to escaping. They're basically hugged up on a wall here. And they finally get to their destination, being the basement where the sewage is emptied. And Ned tells Ross that, you know, we can't do this. He's like, you know, he's basically thought about it. He's not going to escape because if he does, Ross's family, his entire family, from his children to his wife to himself, as well as his wife and any other friends that were involved, that he knows that these people are so powerful that they will also get them, just like they got him. And so he decides not to escape, and he actually ends up returning to his cell. Ross, of course, is completely devastated. He knows that his friend is not going to survive this because this was their last actual chance to get him free. Once again, primping and pruning and preening and all that kind of stuff. That's what George does best. And so what is he preparing for? His wedding to poor little innocent Cecily. In the meantime, we're back at the prison, and Ned has some time with his wife, and he looks out. He knows it's the last time that he'll really see freedom, and he's, you know, in his uniform preparing. And there's, you know, some very tender moments, tear-jerking moments with his wife, and he's, you know, they're just basically saying goodbye in a way without saying the words goodbye. But she has a last minute gift for him, which is to tell him that she's pregnant. And he is elated by that last speck of life that he'll be able to leave on this earth and not leave his wife alone. So beautiful moments, you know, he's hugging her belly, he kisses her belly. He's just, you know, he can go to the gallows and not feel as if everything happened in vain. Of course, Kitty is devastated. I mean, she now is going to have to face life without her husband. And of course, I mean, how, you know, what else would her reaction be? So Cecily and Jeffrey are taken to the church so that, you know, Jeffrey can be tormented by witnessing his stepfather marrying the woman he loves. And, you know, George can sit there and sort of like, you know, preen his little feathers about it. And, you know, Cecily definitely does not, of course, want to marry this guy. So what happens is, and I'm going to go back on that, is, you know, what's his name? George basically turns to Jeffrey Charles and says, you know, he basically doesn't know what the big deal is, because even though Cecily won't be his wife, meaning Jeffrey Charles's wife, she will be his stepmother. And that creates a turn of events that will be coming up soon. So poor Ned is on his way to the gallows for this horrific punishment that he does not deserve. And something happens. As the vows are read, and the priest asks, basically, you know, is there anyone who has a reason why these two shouldn't be married? Speak now or forever hold their peace. She comes up with a second, like in a second, this awesome plan, the second plan to get out of this marriage, which was to state that she and Jeffrey Charles had slept together, although they never did. And she basically made it as salacious as she could by saying, basically, we did it as often as we could, every time we could see each other. Okay, you know, she didn't say it exactly the way I'm saying it, but that's exactly what it equated to. And it was awesome. What a great scene. Of course, her father is like, what the holy bleep? And he is, to say that he was angry is really, it really is not the word to surmise how he felt. And this actor really played up the role. Jeffrey Charles loved every minute of it. He even piped in, adding to the plan by saying, yeah, you can marry her. However, she'll be probably carrying my child. So, you know, if you want to marry her and have her give birth to my child, you know, that's totally fine with me. And of course, George hated that and stormed out. He said nothing the entire time, stormed out of the church, stomping loudly. Cecily's father turned even more into the devil than you thought he was already. And he basically told her, you and basically Jeffrey Charles will regret this. Like, his threat was a growl added at the end. And as she walks by, she, you know, they hold hands, and she continues out of the church. Ned gives a speech to the crowd, which is thousands apparently. And, you know, they basically turned him into a martyr for the people when they decided to murder him. So Ned was incredibly smart and wrote this speech that he gave to the folks, and really like firing up the crowd, giving it a new energy to the point that they were yelling and screaming to let him go. And, you know, Ned is now going to be placed on the box or block. I don't know what they called it back then. And this noose goes around his neck. At the last second, this dude's hand goes up, and he's, you know, to stop all proceedings, because he receives a letter from the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, the letter did not save Ned, but what it did is it basically said that he was only to be hung. All of the other charges, not charges, but all of the other punishments would not occur. So, you know, they made Ned a martyr. And of course, devastation. You know, everyone, even the people in the crowd are like devastated. There's crying, there's moaning. It's, you know, this loud music of sorrow. Look at Caroline's face. Awful. Of course, George is pretty pissed off about everything that happened because nothing he does seems to go right. Unfortunately, he doesn't know that one thing went right, which was the murder of Ned. The one thing that went wrong with that is Ned is now a martyr to the people, which is awesome. Power to the people, we all say. But one of the things that his uncle throws in is, well, you know, good thing that you didn't marry that girl, even though he kept pushing her on him. And he's like, you know, but don't worry about it. We'll find someone else for you. And basically, George said there will be no more women. There will be no more marriages. He's not getting married anymore. Evil ass Mr. Mercer makes himself known now that Ned has been murdered. And while he's in Ned's cell and collecting his items, Ross says something to the effect of, you know, whoever the governor is of this, you know, basically of the prison, I guess they called them governors versus wardens back then. He said that that person should be hanged, not knowing that Mr. Mercer is the governor of that prison. And the look on Ross's face was more than priceless. It was just, you know, he couldn't believe it because that's when he realized that this is the guy who is giving all this false witness, all this false information. If they said X, he said Y. If they said up, he went behind their back and said down. And that was the reason why Ned was murdered and hung. And so now he knew that this guy was not an ally, but indeed an evil, evil villain. Cecily is physically thrown in her room by her father and locked there and told that she would not leave until they left the country. Guess who now wants to learn how to read? Guess who's copying Rosina? Oh, it's crappy, crooked ass Tess. Oh, backwards H to the O, as some people would call her. And, you know, Sam, of course, always wants to save everyone's soul, so he's clueless. And so, you know, his friends and family, though, Prudy, Demelza, and Sam, they're keeping an eye on things, but they know that it seems as if Tess is getting way too close. Ross is back in Cornwall, and he desperately needs, you know, his wife, someone who that can just hug him and keep him close because, you know, he just lost one of his close friends. And she tells him to cry. It's okay to cry. You need to cry. You need to let it out. This is devastating. Don't try to hold it in. And so she leaves him alone. And when she does that, and he's sitting there mourning his friend, one of the evil Mr. Mercer's cronies comes up and hits him on the back of the head and throws him into a well. So no one knows where Ross is. Wow, what an episode. Jam-packed full of everything. So let me give you some quick notes for next week, as well as a few other things. So just remember, there's only 2 episodes left. So after next week's episode and the final episode, I am going to do probably a Q&A or something. I'm not sure which one or if I'll do it for both. But in the next episode coming up, where's Ross? Sort of like, where's Waldo? Where is Ross? Search parties are everywhere. No one knows where he is except for the evildoers. And George, his uncle, and Ralph, those 3 evildoers don't even know where he is. They don't know that the evil Mr. Mercer has, basically assaulted this guy and had him thrown in a well. Tess gets very close to Sam. At least she tries to. Jeffrey is brutally beaten up because of his love of Cecily and their attempt to elope. George is made aware, as I said, that Ross has vanished, and he's actually surprised because he's like, hey, someone did the work for me. Demelza is taken. So think of that movie with, what's his name? Leslie Nielsen. Taken. Yeah, she's taken. or Liam Nielsen, I think is, I don't know, whatever his name is. So some things to think about is, wow, the silver fox Ned is dead. So freaking sad. Ross is kidnapped and left to die in a well alone. Sam is getting tricked by the temptress Tess. And how will that affect things? So thank you guys for tuning in. Please do me a favor. Give me a thumbs up. It takes a lot to get all these photos together and notes. I have to watch the episode like 2 or 3 times, which is not a punishment. I tell you, I enjoy it, but I do appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. Share the video and remember to subscribe. Be well.